Hello and welcome back to Felony Spectator. I am your host, Heather. Welcome to 2022 and thank you for waiting for me while I took December off. It was much needed, but I'm happy to be back and recording new episodes. I hope you all survived the holidays. Literally, I don't want to do an episode on my subscribers. In today's episode, we're going to talk about Stacey Castor. She was convicted of murdering her husband and the attempted murder of her daughter. There's also proof that she killed her first husband as well, but she wasn't charged for that. Instead, it was used as evidence against her for her second husband's murder. She almost had everybody fooled until she tried to frame her daughter Ashley for the murders and stage her daughter's suicide. It's kind of wild how evil she really is. So let's get into it. Stacey Castor, born Stacey Daniels, was born July 24th, 1967 to Gerald and Judith Daniels. Stacey was said to be an outgoing and a lively redhead. She was 17 when she met her first husband, Michael Wallace, and most people always thought Stacey and Michael were deeply in love. Stacey herself would say that she fell in love with Michael because he was larger than life. He was generous, a really helpful person, and was the life of the party. In fact, he really loved to party, according to her, so much so that it almost ruined their relationship. Stacey would get pregnant, and they actually separated for a while. They did get back together and would get married in 1990 when Ashley, their daughter, was about 2 years old. Then in 1991, they'd have a second daughter who they named Bree. Bree was instantly a daddy's girl. Now, I don't know if that's because he wasn't really around when Ashley was a tiny baby and didn't develop that same bond, but Ashley would end up being closer to her mom and would later say that they were like best friends. Now, according to Stacey, in an interview she did in 2009, Michael was actually someone who'd suffered from drug and alcohol abuse, and this bothered Stacey. She still claimed to love him very much, but the family also suffered financially because of it. Stacey was working as an ambulance dispatcher, and Michael was a mechanic, which sounds like a decent middle-class family, but I guess his addiction was making it harder than it should be for them. Their work schedules were also opposite, meaning one was working during the day and the other at night, and this would cause them to grow even farther apart. It's rumored that they were both having affairs on each other as well. Near the end of 1999, Stacey had told a friend that she was considering getting a divorce from Michael, but then Michael suddenly became sick. Michael would tell his doctor that he was having weird chest problems, breathing issues, he felt nauseous, his balance was off, and he was getting chronic headaches. Almost as if he was drunk, but he wasn't actually drinking at this time. The doctor first thought that he had a middle ear infection, but upon further investigation, it wasn't. It wasn't anything obvious, and the doctors weren't really sure what was going on with him because he was otherwise healthy. By Christmas of 1999, Mike's sister would say that he was a mess. He was coughing all the time and just looked swollen and puffy. She'd say his health continued to deteriorate to the point where he couldn't even go to work anymore. Then, on January 11th, Michael would be found on the couch unresponsive by Ashley, the oldest daughter who was just 12 years old at the time. She remembers him laying there on the couch making strange faces but not acknowledging her. She'd have to leave the house to go get her sister from school, and as she was leaving, her last memory would be of his arm falling limply off the couch. Sadly, by the time she got home from school, she saw the ambulance in the driveway and her father being taken away. Michael was pronounced dead at the hospital. Doctors assumed that Michael just had a heart attack because he was fairly young and generally healthy. Stacey told them that he had a drinking problem, so to blame the heart attack made sense, and most likely the cause of his death. But when they asked Stacey if she wanted an autopsy to be sure, she declined. She would discuss that with Michael's mom, and Michael's mom did agree that it wasn't necessary, and she wanted him to rest in peace and just proceed with the funeral. Now, poor Stacey was a widow, a single mother of 2 girls. People really felt sorry for her. Her daughters were heartbroken, but they remember that when it was just the three of them, it was actually fun. I mean, Michael was missed, but they were all really happy. After Michael's death, Stacey had also taken the kids to Disneyland with part of the $55,000 life insurance policy that was paid out. It said she spent quite a bit of the insurance money on the funeral and bills as well. So to most people, it didn't seem like Stacey benefited financially from his passing. So there was never any red flags that someone could have been responsible for his death. In 2001, not too long after Michael passed away, she met David Castor through her boss at work. She instantly fell in love with David, and David was a really fun person. He was very work-driven and also very much into the outdoors. He had owned snowmobiles, four-wheelers, a boat. He was always ready to plan his next adventure. David also had a son from his previous marriage, David Jr. After dating for a few years, they would get married on August 16th, 2003. Apparently, Ashley and Bree weren't happy about Stacey getting married again. Of course, it's hard to see your parents date, let alone get married to other people. But their biggest issue was that David was really strict. He made it pretty clear that he was in charge, and he also didn't like being questioned. He wanted the girls to do as they were told, and this was quite different than when it was just Stacey and the girls. So even though they butted heads with David, they did want their mom to be happy. The marriage itself would be good for about the first year, but by the second year, when that honeymoon stage ended, they'd start bickering all the time. Stacey claimed that David, too, had a drinking problem and was apparently an angry drunk. On Friday, August 19th, 2005, they'd get into one of their big arguments, which lasted upwards of 7 hours. They were fighting because Stacey had decided to cancel a holiday that she and David were going to take without Ashley and Bree. Stacey thought that the girls were just too young to stay home alone and decided to cancel. And this apparently set David off. Now, David was never violent, but when they did fight, it was usually nasty and hurtful. This time, David got so angry that he got drunk and continued to drink throughout the entire weekend. On Monday, August 22nd, 2005, around 1 p.m., Stacey would make a 911 call because she was worried something was wrong with David. She would tell the 911 operator that her husband didn't show up for work that Monday morning, which was very out of character for him. She went on to say that David was on a drinking bender all weekend, but she was now concerned, so she needed someone to come and check up on him. When the police showed up, Stacey was sitting in a lawn chair outside waiting, casually smoking a cigarette. She claims that she had not entered the home yet, which the sergeant thought was a bit odd considering she was supposed to be the worried wife. But she said the operator told her to wait outside for police, so that's what she was doing. She would tell the sergeant about their fight Friday night and how he slammed down some Southern Comfort and went into the bedroom, locking himself in. On Saturday, when she checked on him, David would throw up all over himself, quote, like Niagara Falls, end quote. She tried to be a good wife and changed his sheets, washed his hair in the tub, and brought him cranberry juice so he could stay hydrated. She also apparently asked David if he wanted medical attention, but he refused. She told the sergeant that when she last saw David, he was screaming at her and very much alive. Sadly, when the sergeant knocked down the door, David was naked, lying face down on the bed, clearly dead, with a bloody pool of vomit under his head. There was dried brown vomit on his hands and in his fingernails as well. His hands were also in a stiff claw-like shape, indicating that he was probably in some sort of pain before he passed. The adjoining bathroom was also in disarray, with the towel bar hanging off the wall, and there was vomit all over the floor there as well. Beside the bed on the nightstand were 2 glasses, one that looked empty and another containing bright green antifreeze. There was also a bottle of apricot-flavored brandy on the nightstand as well. And slightly under the bed, near his feet, they would find a blue plastic antifreeze bottle. So at first glance, this appeared to be suicide by antifreeze poisoning. Stacey said that David was depressed. He had recently lost his father 1 month prior, and after their argument Friday night before he locked himself in the bedroom, he was telling her that he felt like a failure and that he was inadequate. She thought that his behavior that weekend was the result of his depression. She says she tried her best to check on David all weekend, and also said that on Saturday night, after hearing a loud crash, she discovered that David had fallen out of bed. She called a friend, Michael Coleman, to help her pick him up and put him back into bed. Michael would also later tell police that David was completely out of it. He barely registered that Michael was even there or recognized him. Even though David was incoherent, Stacey decided to let David sleep it off. Then around 5 a.m. Sunday, Stacey checked on him again, and David screamed at Stacey and demanded that she get out of the house and take her kids with her. She was sick of seeing David drink himself to death, so she did end up leaving. She would still go to work Monday morning, but started to feel scared, so she called David every hour to check on him, but he never answered the phone. By 1 p.m., she finally called 911. She claims she didn't call 911 in the morning because she thought she'd let him just straighten himself out. When Stacey was told about the antifreeze bottle, she actually said that her and David had watched an episode of 48 Hours where a woman killed 2 husbands by putting antifreeze in green Jell-O. And maybe this is where he got the idea. The police did agree that it appeared to be suicide, but because it was a sudden death, they decided to still do a quick investigation of the home. During the walkthrough of the home, police would find an empty prescription bottle in the bedroom and a turkey baster, which appeared to be brand new in the kitchen garbage. Inside the baster, it looked as though there was antifreeze in there as well. Police took the turkey baster because it seemed strange and out of place. Most people don't randomly throw away turkey basters unless they're broken, but this one looked brand new. Another odd thing was that the actual bottle of antifreeze was clean, but there was vomit dripping down the side of the bed where the bottle was located and vomit below the bottle, but nothing on the actual bottle. The bottle of cranberry juice and glasses looked relatively clean as well. They expected them to look messier, thinking if someone who was sick and drunk and throwing up was handling them, they'd be dirty. So they would fingerprint those as well. Police started to think that the bedroom almost looked staged. They would also find a shotgun under the bed. Now, why would David torture himself with an incredibly painful death by antifreeze when there was a much easier way to go out? David was also knowledgeable with engines, and he would know antifreeze would be a terrible way to go. It just didn't make sense. Suicide by antifreeze isn't totally unheard of, but statistically, death by poison is typically done by pills or done by women, and men usually use guns or jump from high heights. When the news broke out that David committed suicide, David's ex-wife was immediately skeptical because that's not how David handled stress or sadness. He would more than likely go camping or 4x4ing. It also wasn't David's character to say that he was inadequate. She also said that David, to her knowledge, wasn't a regular drinker. It didn't make sense to her that he would drink through an entire weekend. Police also learned that in David's will, he left everything to Stacey and the stepdaughters. Strangely, nothing was left to his own biological son. This would be the final red flag that set an investigation in motion. It just didn't make sense that David would leave things to stepdaughters that he didn't get along with and not his own biological son. When David Jr. tried to talk to Stacey about it, she refused to give him anything except little odds and ends, nothing of value or importance. Later on in the investigation, it was proven that the will was forged. David never signed the will. Stacey signed it, and the people who apparently witnessed the signature said that they were close friends to the Castors and didn't question it. They just trusted that it was the right signatures. This was also right before their wedding, and Stacey made it seem like they were rushing to get it done before the wedding. Nobody questioned Stacey or ever brought it up again. Remember when Stacey told police that she called David almost every hour while he was locked in the bedroom? Well, her phone records would show that she called David only once. And why would she lie about that? Detectives think that it was because she wanted to wait until she was absolutely sure he was dead. Forensic also returned their findings as to what was in the turkey baster, and it was in fact antifreeze. The tip of the baster was also shown to have quite a lot of DNA belonging to David Castor, which happened to be in the form of saliva. David's fingerprints weren't even found to be on the glasses found in the bedroom either. But guess whose was? Stacy's. Police were then thinking it was pretty obvious that Stacey killed David, but now they had to prove it was Stacey. They would look into Stacey's first husband's death. They even asked Stacey about her first husband during her initial interview, and she said he had all sorts of medical issues and just unexpectedly died after feeling ill. Well, police would get Michael's medical records, and shocking, he had zero issues. Now they wanted to know how he really died. Now, when a person ingests antifreeze, your symptoms include abdominal pain, headaches, dizziness, or you might be unbalanced, which is basically what Michael's symptoms were. Severe poisoning, like David's, includes vomiting, loss of consciousness, kidney failure, and brain damage. Unfortunately, with David, he was also given alcohol, and the treatment of antifreeze poisoning is ethanol. So David suffered much longer than a typical poisoning because that alcohol was preventing his body from absorbing the antifreeze. When you digest antifreeze, the chemicals change inside your system, and crystals form and deposit in the kidneys, sometimes the heart, brain, and lungs. The only way to know how Michael died is to see if he too had crystals forming in his organs. Police would exhume Michael's body on September 5th, 2007 to do a full examination on his organs to see if there had been a formation of crystals. And guess what? Michael was loaded with crystals. He was definitely poisoned with antifreeze. They would also find rat poison in his system as well. September 7th, 2007, Stacey was brought back into the station for more questioning because they wanted to know more about what happened the day David died. During questioning, detectives would ask what glass it was that she had poured the cranberry juice into. Her response was, quote, "Well, when I poured the antifree, I mean the cranberry juice, you're trying to confuse me," end quote. And at that point, she stopped the interview and said that the detectives were trying to frame her and she wanted a lawyer. The police would also inform her that they already exhumed Michael's body and were doing a full investigation because they didn't believe her. Police also went to see Ashley as well. Ashley would be about to start her first day of college when police would come to her school and ask her if she knew how her dad and stepdad died. She, of course, said heart attack and suicide, but they would tell her that both Michael and David were murdered. Now, I don't really know why they did it at school. Maybe they wanted to make sure Stacey wasn't around, but this was very upsetting for Ashley. She would call her mom, and Stacey's response would be, "They're on to me. They think I killed them." Ashley was actually really outraged that police thought her mom would do that. She was also really upset that her dad was dug up and thought it was really inhumane and he deserved to rest in peace. Since Ashley was so upset, Stacey would pick Ashley up from school and her mom would say that they were both having a hard day and needed to just relax, so they should get drunk. And this was out of character for Stacey. Ashley was really quite surprised that her mom wanted to drink, but she said okay because her mom was like her best friend. It was kind of exciting, the thought of drinking with her mom. They would stop at the liquor store and Stacey would buy watermelon Smirnoff Ice and would pour Ashley's in a glass for her first. Her next drink would be directly out of the bottle, but after only 2 drinks, she became really tired and felt sick. Her mom said that that was normal and would give her a pill so she could sleep it off, and Ashley went to bed. The next morning, Ashley woke up with a hangover, but didn't really think anything of it. She went to school that morning and returned around noon. Stacey was already at home when Ashley arrived. And strangely, Stacey said that they should drink again. It was Ashley's 21st birthday, so she'd make them some vodka, OJs, and Sprite. Ashley was surprised because it was only noon, but she agreed again. She thought it was almost cool that her mom wanted to drink with her. Before they would drink, she would first go downstairs to move her laundry to the dryer, and when she returned, the drink was already made. The drink itself looked a bit strange to Ashley. Something cloudy was swirling around, but Stacey told her to just stir it up because she had put some spice in her screwdriver. Ashley would later remember that her drink didn't taste good at all, and she told her mom that she couldn't drink it, but Stacey would get her a straw and tell her just to keep it to the very back of her throat so she didn't have to taste it. It was a little trick she knew from when she was young. They wanted to get drunk, so this would do the trick. Again, like the night before, Ashley felt tired, so much so that she went to lay down and immediately passed out again. Bree, Ashley's 16-year-old sister, would come home later that night from work and try to go into Ashley's room. But Stacey allegedly would shoo her away, telling her that Ashley needed to sleep and to just leave her alone. The next morning, Bree would hear strange noises, which she described as short bursts of high-pitched moaning coming from Ashley's room. So she opened the door to find Ashley with her eyes wide open, naked on the end of her bed. She was unresponsive and in convulsions, throwing up. Bree tried to call her name, but Ashley wasn't responding. Bree would then run out of the room and told her mom to call 911 right away because something seriously was wrong with Ashley. Stacey acted surprised and ran into Ashley's bedroom to see what was happening, and she would call 911 saying that her daughter needed help because she believed her daughter had taken pills and there was an empty bottle of vodka in her room. Bree would also come back into the room and see a note on the bed. And Bree would later testify that she doesn't remember seeing the note when she first entered Ashley's room, only the second time. She would pick up the note and see that it was a typed letter explaining how Ashley was responsible for the deaths of her father and stepfather. The media reports this letter as a suicide letter. Stacey would then make sure the dispatcher knew that this must have been a suicide attempt. It would almost seem like Stacey really wanted to get that point across, more so than even getting help for Ashley. Miraculously, Ashley lived, even though the doctors feared that she wouldn't pull through. It turned out that she had a strange cocktail of drugs in her system that were shutting down her organs. If Bree didn't find Ashley, she definitely would have died within the next 15 minutes. When Ashley woke up, police would question her right away because of the confession. Investigators needed to know what happened and why she killed these men. When Ashley was told about the letter, she was confused and denied ever writing a note or ever wanting to kill herself. She was shocked by what the police were telling her. All she remembered was that she was drinking with her mom, she felt unwell, and then woke up in the hospital. Ashley did not want to end her life. She just started college, she had a boyfriend, she did not want to kill herself. Forensics would fingerprint the note, and only Bree's prints and Stacey's prints were on the letter. Ashley didn't even touch the letter that was placed on her bed. Within the letter, the admission to poisoning her dad and stepdad with antifreeze was actually typed out as antifree. Now, this was noted because Stacey referred to antifreeze as antifree during her initial interview with police. Now, Stacey would argue during the trial that she said antifree because she stopped herself from finishing her sentence. But it was just too coincidental to ignore. Police would arrest Stacey Castor while she was at the hospital visiting Ashley for the murder of David Castor and the attempted murder of Ashley. And the trial was interesting because Stacey, as well as her defense team and some of the family members, including Ashley's grandmother, were adamant that Ashley did murder her dad and stepdad. The defense built their entire case on Ashley as the murderer, even though Ashley wasn't on trial. Ashley was only 12 when her biological dad died, and in the letter she says it was all because daddy was mean to mommy and loved Bree more. So she put antifreeze in his Gatorade. Grandma was also 100% convinced the letter was true. According to Grandma, Ashley was a jealous kid with anger issues. And as far as she knew, Michael always favored Bree and would severely spank and punish Ashley, so she had reason to want to kill her dad. There was speculation that Ashley did write the letter. Writing experts were brought in and said based on grammar, punctuation, and spelling, they thought it was actually likely that Ashley wrote the letter. Prosecutors were pretty quick to debunk it, saying that Stacey probably purposely wrote the letter to make it seem like Ashley, and really, what 12-year-old girl has the knowledge of poisoning people with antifreeze? Other evidence the prosecutors brought forward was that there were 2 drafts of the letter deleted from the home computer. And the final draft was accessed the day before the murder while Ashley was at school. So prosecutors believe she couldn't have opened the file and printed the letter while she wasn't home. In the letter, it also says she killed David because he was mean to mommy, and it wasn't fair to mommy. She believed mommy would never leave David, so she killed him too. It was easy. All she had to do was offer him a drink. She would add antifreeze to his soda. She said she couldn't go to jail for the rest of her life, so she asked that mommy forgives her and to take care of Bree and to say goodbye to her boyfriend. And, quote, now everyone is going to know what really happened, and they know it wasn't you, it was me. So the so-called suicide note was 750 words, mostly talking about Stacey's innocence. It just didn't seem like a real suicide note. On September 25th, 2008, a judge ruled that the death of Michael Wallace could be submitted as evidence, which was huge for the prosecution. The trial would become a mom versus daughter, and Stacey didn't hesitate at all to put full blame on her own daughter. Thankfully, the jury saw through all of her lies, and Stacey was convicted of second-degree murder of David Castor and attempted murder of her daughter Ashley, as well as forging David's will. And she was sentenced to 51 years in prison. Stacey has maintained her innocence and insisted that Ashley was responsible for everything. She passed away in prison in 2016 at the age of 48 from a heart attack. Ashley Wallace has understandably suffered greatly by the hands of her mother. When she was only 12, her father died, and then her mother betrayed her so horribly. She admits that she will never truly understand why her mother did what she did, but she's moved on and lives in New York with her husband. My thoughts? I think this case is wild. It's astonishing to me that Stacey killed both her husbands and then would frame her own daughter. Ashley has said that she considered her mom one of her best friends. They love to hang out, and it just seems so inconceivable that a mother could frame their own daughter and ruin their relationship. Even after being caught red-handed, she still denies everything and went to the grave blaming her daughter. Thank God now she's dead. That's it for today. Please hit subscribe if you haven't yet so you don't miss another episode, and we will see you next week.